Welcome back to Dakota Jet. In today's video, I'll be showing you two big parts of my home cockpit setup. First, I'll walk you through building a simple DIY panel with push buttons and LEDs, from drilling and wiring to programming it in Mobiflight. Then I'll take you step by step through how I get my cockpit ready for a flight, including setting up Microsoft Flight Simulator, arranging the instrument displays across my monitors, and running everything through Mobiflight. Let's get started. So this is the pedestal, just to the left of the throttle quadrant, and below the comm transponder and weather radar panel just up here, we have a blank panel. I'm going to turn this into something a little bit more useful today. We're going to be using some bog standard push buttons and some LEDs to make a communication panel between the flight deck and the cabin crew. This is a feature that is supported in the Phoenix A320 series aircraft. So we're going to make use of the space we have here and put in some LEDs and push buttons. So now that it's all marked out on the panel, I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes. You just need a drill bit of the size of the component that's going to go into it. So in this case it's a 13mm drill bit. These are for the buttons, and a 3mm for the LEDs. So I'm just going to go ahead and drill them now. Swap drill bits to the 3mm one. So that's all the holes drilled that I'm going to need today. So the next part of this video is going to be removing the panel and sanding it down ready for the components. So here we are back at my desk. This is the board out of the cockpit with the drill holes all sanded down, ready to receive the components. These are the components we're going to be using today, just the two little 3mm LEDs and these black push buttons, non-latching push buttons. So to put these in, it's just take the caps off the back, slide them into position, put the washer back through the back and the nut, and just tighten up. Get them nice and firm so they're not going to go anywhere. Might need some pliers just to help you tighten them. There we go, that's fine. Don't worry about these little bits. We can go around with the brush and get them all painted, get the lines removed as well. So here we are with the push buttons in the panel all inserted, and that's the back. And now it's time to do the LEDs. So we drilled 3mm holes for the 3mm LEDs earlier. So in theory they should just go straight in, and they do. That's good. So I normally just spread the wires coming out the back apart a little. Make sure it's nice and firmly in there. And you can see it there, just sticking through, which is what we want. And then to secure, I just use a little bit of glue on the back. Nothing special, just something cheap and cheerful from the local hardware store. That sets pretty quick, that's the main thing. So just glue that on and repeat the process with the other one. Now I'm going to start the wiring process for this panel. As you can see, each of the components here, they have two prongs coming off them. We have a positive and a negative. On the buttons, it's quite simple. You can use either one for either. The LEDs, however, it's just the longer wire coming off is the positive and the short wire coming off is the negative. So we're going to focus mainly on the negative side for the moment. So because of the board I'm going to be using, which we'll get into later in this video, I'm going to use a common ground, so which means I'm going to link all the ground pins on all of these components together, and then just have one wire coming off all of them into the board. So we're going to do that now. So I've got 6 roughly equal pieces of wire that I've just cut. I'm going to trim the ends and connect them to the components before soldering them all together. So to trim the ends, just wire strippers, and that'll do the job nicely. Make sure you twistle the ends, keep it neat. So we're going to start over here and just feed it through the loop. Just wrap it round for now. We're going to solder these shortly. And then do the same on this side for the other ones. Like that, we link all these together. Like so. So now they're all linked together. We just need to do the same for the 2 LEDs into there. And then another wire hooks onto there, solder it all on, tape it all up, and then that goes off to the board. So instead of using 6 separate ground connectors, which I don't think the board even has, we're just using one. Now all the components, including the LEDs, as you can see, they're all wired onto the common ground with a longer wire coming off. On the end of the longer wire I've trimmed it, and I'm going to use this wire, which is a connector, jumper cable, which will go into the board. So I just need to strip this end, connect it to there, solder it, and then this just plugs into the board, into the ground pin. So we're going to do that now. Again, different ways of doing this. This is just the way I've done it for my project. It's cost effective. It doesn't take too much time, but it is more time consuming than other methods, and yeah, it works for me. So I just leave it like this, and then I'll solder it, and then just put a bit of electrical tape over that. So now that just goes into the ground pin on the board, and that's the ground supply for all the components on that board. So I've now got my positive cables all ready. So these are just normal cables. I've gone for the red colour this time, just to differentiate the two, always a good practice. Then on the end I've got the same jumper cable used as for the grounds. Again, you notice different colours. And then I've made a list of the colours just here to the side. So as I connect one wire to one component, I can write down that, say, the blue wire is for the right LED or whatever. And that's the way I do it, and that's the way I just keep track of things as well. So it's exactly the same process, just for the other side, and it's one wire per thing. We can't hook all these together like we did with the grounds. These go off into the board and use their own input essentially into the board. So same process. I'm just wrapping them around for now, and then we're going to solder them in a minute. So that is the brown wire. I'll get my pen, and that's turn it over. Can't remember which way it is. So that is going to be the reset button. So we write reset, so we know what it is, and the process goes on. So now we're going to move on and start the soldering process, now that all the wires are loosely connected to the components, as you can see. But they need to be a little bit more secure to ensure they don't come off, and to ensure there is a constant supply and there's no changes in the circuit. So got my soldering iron here to the right, always handy to have it in a little holder just to make the things a lot easier. So I just leave that there so you can see. And we're going to feed onto the component, just warming it up, and then slowly add in the solder. You'll see the smoke coming off it. So the soldering iron is nice and hot. You need to give it a couple of minutes to warm up. There we go, and then just clean it with a damp piece of kitchen roll or something, and continue for the rest of the components and the parts. So that's all the components soldered. So we just need to inspect the work, make sure there's nothing loose or it's going to fall off or break the circuit in any way. All looks good. Oh, they're all good. So now is the final part, and that's putting them up to a board. This is the final part of the build process essentially, before we move on to programming and testing of the homemade DIY panel we've made today. The cards I use are these. They are Lago Mega cards. They're very good. They're very comparable to Arduino. In fact, I think they're just a cheaper copy of them. Yeah, they work very good. So as you can see, there's different parts to it. So there's the analog ports here, A0 through to A15. They are analog ports, so we're not going to be using them today, but we would be using them for like potentiometers, that sort of thing. And then we've got a whole host of digital ports. There's simply loads. There's 50 odd, 53 I think, digital ports. And then the TX ones I've never actually used, but I believe they're COM ports. I've never used them, so I have no idea what they're for. And then we've got a number of other utility ports. So we've got the 5 volts. Again, we won't be using them today, but that's more for stuff if you're plugging it into 7-segment displays, like I will be doing with my clock. So I'll make sure to video that so you can see how that all works, and because that wires up slightly differently, but the principles are the same. And then the negative pins, the grounds, as well, in various points along the board. So we're going to be using the ground pins and the digital pins today. Doesn't matter what digital pins you use, as long as each component has its own individual pin. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. So we're going to start with the brown wire, which is my reset button, and that's going to go into pin 52 on the board. As you can see, they just clip in quite easily into the side there, in and out like that. So that goes into digital pin 52, and I'm just going to make a note next to that, next to the drawing I have on the side. So zoom back out. So the brown wire is in pin 52. This is all very important to make sure this all marries up, so that when we're programming it we don't come into any problems. So now we just have to do the negatives, which is like we showed earlier, just the one wire coming off that. That's all linked to all of them, and that's just going into one of the ground pins, which we're going to put into that one. As you saw earlier, they are very easy to move about. You can take them out very easily. So what I like to do is I just put some electrical tape around them so they can't really move. So here we are, it's all done. From a build point of view, it's just programming, well, installing back into the cockpit and a programming left to do. It's all been soldered as we did earlier. All the ground pins here in green, and then the inputs in red, the positives. That's it from the front, just 4 simple push buttons and 2 LEDs. So this panel now goes back to where it was in the cockpit on the pedestal, and we program it to work in the sim. All the magic's done through this board. I've added some electrical tape, as I said I would, just to keep it A, tidy, and B, secure in place. And as you can see here, I've got all the inputs, so these are important. We're going to use these in a minute in Mobiflight to configure it and program it to work with the Phoenix. Don't need to use the pin for the ground because it is just a ground connection, a negative. We don't need to do anything for that in Mobiflight, so we're just going to leave that as is. It's also important to mention that this board just plugs into the computer via USB, so it's just a normal sort of printer cable. It comes in a box with this, and then that end just goes in there. Then that into a USB port. I use quite a few USB docking points powered, so I'll just use one of them under the pedestal and it'll go in like that. Now we are back in the cockpit. I'm going to introduce you to Mobiflight. Mobiflight version 10.5.3.12 beta. The beta version is very good, works very well with Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. It allows me to use my cockpit through the one program, all the buttons and switches through one. That includes the peripherals from WinWing and Flight Sim PM, as I mentioned in my first video. So we're going to program the 4 buttons and 2 LEDs we made earlier for the cabin crew flight deck communication panel on my pedestal. So to start, I've plugged in the board into a USB port. So we're going to go to Extras and Settings. In Settings, we're going to use the top navigation bar and go to Mobiflight Modules, and here are all the boards I have plugged in for my setup. This one's the new one, as it's generic, so if we go on that. Some people, when they plug in the Mobiflight Megas, the Elago Megas, they all need to update the firmware for this to work. Just click Update, it'll do its thing, and then you should be good to go. So I'm going to call this one, I'm going to rename it, and call it Pedestal Resilience. No, I'm not, because it won't let me finish it, so we're going to put it Pedestal Spare. There's 53 digital ports and 10 analog ports on that card. As you can see, I've barely used any of them. I've used 6 digital pins, so I've got plenty left to use. I'm going to continue adding buttons and switches to the pedestal as time goes on. I'm going to add a few more here and there, so that board will be perfect for that. So to start, we're going to go to add a device, and we're going to add a button. So the button is going to be called Cabin ATT, and from the sheet we used earlier, that is on pin number 48. So you just press the button there for pin settings and go down to pin number 48 and repeat the process. So add a device. We're going to add an LED this time for one of the two LEDs we have, and we're going to call this Cabin LED, and that is on pin number 42. So we're going to go down to pin 42, and that's that. And now we're going to continue for the other 4 inputs we have on the board. So as you can see, we now have the 4 push buttons and 2 LEDs installed on the pedestal spare card. So we're going to upload config. OK. That uploads, and then we're going to click OK. So next we're going to be assigning those inputs to commands in the sim, and to do that we need to add an input config. So we click on that. I like to close that first, and then I rename it. So the input config, I'm going to call it is reset. Reset push button. Give it the tick, and then open the box again. So we need to go to input, and this is choosing the input. So we're going to select our reset button. So go down to pedestal spare and reset. There is another way of doing this, so if I clear that, if I press scan for input and I press the reset button, the actual button in the cockpit, it should come up. There we are, because I've already assigned it previously. So if on that, after that we go to input settings. So this is now what we want it to do when we press that button in the sim. So we're going to go down to action type and select Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're going to type in reset. Vendor is Phoenix, and system, it is a radio system, and that narrows it down loads. So we've gone from thousands of matches to just 6, so it's going to be one of these 6. So we're going to go to the list. So Phoenix 320 ACP1 reset button, press. That's what we want, so we're going to press that. So now when we press that button, it's going to press the reset button essentially. This is a 2-type input setting, so we need to do for a press and for a release. So we're going to go back over to the other tab, onto on release, and repeat the process. Reset. Vendor is Phoenix. System is radio. And this time we're going to press ACP1 reset button release. And OK. And that's it, done. And then we just have to repeat the process. So I'm going to just show you next the output settings, because our LEDs are not inputs. We don't press them, we don't change them, they're just either on or off. So we're going to, so that's an output. So we add the output and then give it a name. So we're going to call this one Cabin LED. Give it a tick, and then assign it. So now if we go to let's clear that. If we go to display and we go to output device, module is going to be the pedestal spare. The output is going to be cabin LED. Now I say if you wanted multiple lights added for when this command happened, you could select multiple and then select all that apply. But for us it's just the cabin LED. If I press test, the LED comes on in my setup. Okay, so once we've tested the LED and assigned the display, we go back to sim variable. We go to vendor of Phoenix in this instance, and I'm just going to search ACP1 and then have a little look on their radio. And right, so what it is, the cabin LED to receiver, so it's that one, ACP1 cabin receive annunciator. So we click that and then just click OK, and then whenever that button is pressed, that LED will come on, and that's that. As you can see, I've done the remaining 4 push buttons and 2 LEDs, so they're all done now. So let's hop into the sim and see it in action. So we're now back in the cockpit. Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 is loaded up, and we're going to give it a quick test. So the first thing I'm going to do is flick the annunciator light test and make sure the LEDs work, which they do. That's perfect. And now I'm going to press the ATT button. As you can see in the sim, I want the ATT LED to come on, and that does. Great. So that's exactly what we want it to do. The next button I'm going to press is the cabin button, and I want the LED above it to also come on, and in the sim we'd expect the cabin volume selector to illuminate and to become active. So let's see if that works. Perfect. So the LED is illuminated in the cockpit and in the sim, so that's what we want. And turning it off does the reverse, so that's perfect. The next button is the PA volume annunciator, and it's the same principle as the cabin one. We want it to, when pressed, we want the LED above it to come on and the LED in the sim to come on. So we're going to press that now, and that works. That's perfect. And pressing it again does the reverse, which is what we want. So the next one is the reset button, and I've programmed this so when you hit reset, it also puts VHF1 back on the primary call. So we want the reset button to indent and the VHF1 call to illuminate. So we press that. There we go. That's perfect. So pressing it illuminates that, and taking it off, pressing it again turns it off. So the reason why I wanted it to go onto the VHF1 call is so typically the cabin call, say they're ready for departure or whatever, so we click cabin and then we answer the call, so the ATT light begins to flash, so we answer ATT, and then after the call we're gonna, we've finished the call, so we can turn off the cabin, and then we press reset. Now notice the ATT light is still on over the cabin, and we want it back onto VHF1 to communicate with air traffic control. So when I press the reset button, it just flicks it back to VHF1 as well as resetting. So that's what we want. As you can see, we're now back in the sim. It's all black screens, cold and dark, just loaded in at the gate here in Manchester. We've got the Mobiflight connector window open, and the first thing you want to do is make sure that the correct project is aligned. Like I said, I fly Headwind, Phoenix and fly-by-wire aircraft, so I just need to make sure I've loaded my Phoenix config, which I have, and then it's as simple as just pressing run. So once I've done that, I can close, minimize Mobiflight, and that's done. I then need to activate a Python script to allow my WinWing MCDU display to communicate with Mobiflight. So then I go to Phoenix and just run the script, and that's now doing its thing, so that's fine. So now what I need to do is turn on the displays in the cockpit and position them in the right place. So as you can see, the screens have now come alive in the on-screen cockpit, so we want to pop them out and put them to our desired location on our other monitors in our cockpit. So what we do is we hover over the screens, you'll see the mouse, but if you click, nothing happens. To change this, we press the Alt-GR key on our keyboard, which is the Alt key to the right of the spacebar. Clicking that brings up a positive zoom cursor. So we press the Alt-GR and then the left click, and as you can see, that's popped our display out, and it sits quite perfectly actually where we want it to be. But if it doesn't, because sometimes it doesn't, you can move it and resize it and whatnot. So we can move it around to the different displays and resize it. So we're going to have it sit around there. I'm going to resize it so it fits perfectly within the monitor bezels. There's a bit of a knack to this, getting it perfect. That's just about right, so I'm happy with that. And then we'll do the same for the navigation display. So Alt-GR, left click, as you can see it's popped it out in between the two displays there. So we just have to grab hold of it, resize it, and then put it on the display in the display area we want it, and that's good, like that. The same with the upper ecam. And the lower ecam. And then the final display is the standby artificial horizon. Resizing it. And that's that. That's all our displays popped out and arranged in the cockpit, ready for a flight. So now I'm going to talk you through how I use my iPad as an additional monitor. So my iPad, or a EFB, electronic flight bag that I use it for, I use as an additional monitor. I find this particularly useful because I fly on the VATSIM network to put the vPilot client over on there, so I can see air traffic control and notifications in the area I'm flying quite easily. I also use it for charts and weather and things like that. So to start, I use a program called GlideX. It's a freeware program and it works very well. So once GlideX is installed, you connect to it over the internet, so Wi-Fi, to your device. So we're going to click Start Now, and as you can see, you can mirror a device if you want to mirror the same screen on the iPad, which for my setup wouldn't really work, but I use the Extend option. So I need to go into my iPad and click on the GlideX iOS app. That loads up, and there we are. As you can see, it's iPad 7EA7. So now on the computer, if I click Extend in the GlideX app, it's going to search for nearby devices, and as you can see, it's found my iPad 7EA7. So I click on that, and it's come up on my iPad as Extend from Desktop, which is what I want to do. So I click Accept, and now it's another monitor. So if I go over with my cursor you can see that it's just a monitor like any other, which is great. So now if I pull up vPilot and I drag it over, it's on my iPad, and the touch on it does work. So if I click connect, it brings up the connect box and whatnot. So yeah, that's how I set up my EFB for use with vPilot as an additional monitor. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I built the DIY panel and how I get my cockpit set up for a flight. If you've got any questions or suggestions for future tutorials, drop them in the comments below. And don't forget to join me next week for a full flight in the A320 heading from Los Angeles up to San Francisco. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more home cockpit content. Until next time, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.